about what it means that this is a student-initiated global social work project. So that means it's really any project that you can dream up. Whether it's somewhere you've gone before, somewhere you've never been, our office is here to support you in putting that together. We don't have a list of specific places you have to go or types of projects you have to do. So this is something that's open to all of our students. So online, on campus, any curriculum track, you do not have to be in the global pathway. You can be from any pathway as well. So our eligibility is broad. Really, the only thing is sort of the timing of when this happens in your program. So if you're a first year student, or if you're a part-time student who will be enrolled at least through August of this year, then you're eligible. If you are graduating in May, like in the April-May graduation or sooner, you aren't eligible. So travel happens during the spring summer, and you have to be enrolled in the spring summer, or that you will be enrolled the following fall in order to be eligible. So it's not something that you can do like right after you graduate. You have to be actually an enrolled student for this opportunity because it is credit bearing. Speaking of which, you can get 1 to 3 elective credits. It is an independent study course. So just like any other independent study course that you create, you work with a faculty instructor and you get credit for it. You cannot get field credit for it. That's a pretty common question because there's a lot of extra requirements for field. So although you might be doing something that's like an internship, it cannot count for field credit. It is elective credit only. And then this is a grant application, and so our office funds up to $3,000 to our awardees. There's other funding opportunities through the school and university as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Because first, I want to turn it over to our student panel to talk to us about their experiences. So we're going to start in the room. And we have wonderful Lila here to talk to us about her experience in Latvia. So you can take it away.
Yeah. Happy to. Thank you, Greta. Thank you for inviting me. I feel like this is such an honor to connect with you all and share my experience because it was so like moving for me, like on many levels. Well, first of all, I'm graduating. I'm in school of social work, master's I moved away, and I was actually scheduled, I was on the 12-month master track to graduate that August. And because of all of this, this opportunity to do the global independent study, I actually postponed my graduation. So that was my experience, but it was so worth it. Everything worked out great, and my schedule a little lighter, which I appreciate. But I spent my global independent study in Latvia, and Latvia is a country in northeastern Europe, the Balkans. And how it came about, first of all, my family is from Latvia. My grandparents came over after World War II. They were displaced from their homes during the war and had to flee for their lives. My mom basically are displaced persons, refugee in Germany. So there was just a lot of trauma during that time. There was this part of me that always wanted to, I've been, but to go back, and so that was sort of one part of the journey. The other part was here at the University of Michigan, I've been studying social work and studying different healing practices, emotional, spiritual healing practices. And I recently decided to continue with my PhD. So research is a big component of that, and I really wanted to deepen my research into something that I was super passionate about. And so it just sort of, all of these, it was a perfect storm of things coming together and offering me this opportunity. And what I was studying there was traditional, like indigenous, Northern European, specifically Latvian healing traditions. And a lot of these are deeply rooted in their culture. They have a very deep interconnection with nature. And a lot of that has to do with a cultural passion for song and singing. And so song and singing kind of like keep them grounded and rooted into nature. And it was really just a thread that I wanted to pull. And then as all these pieces started together, the whole journey unfolded in a beautiful way that I wasn't expecting. And I ended up, if I want to look at my poster, that briefly that you'll have to do once you finish the global impact study. A lot of that outlines the lessons that I learned, that I researched. As far as the lead up to that, Greta was a huge resource, and I really took advantage of that. I was kind of had these partial ideas in my head. I knew like where I wanted to go. I kind of knew what I wanted to study. And I actually emailed her. I sat down in her office and we kind of, I just verbalized some things and they fell into place. She was super helpful throughout. Yeah, happy to go into more detail about what I learned in theory. That's sort of the high level. As far as my faculty advisor, Todd Herrenfold, who teaches program evaluation and research, he was one of the few faculty members that most of my good teachers I had were just like lecturers, I believe, and so I just drew from the courses that I had already taken and people that I knew who were faculty advisors, and then that day that I decided actually I was in the hallway. Hey, I'm thinking about doing a global study. Would you mind being my faculty advisor? And I was thrilled to do that. I ended up doing 1 credit hour versus 3 just because I didn't need the credits, but if you need those full 3 credits, definitely take them and expand the experience to meet the credits that you need. What else can I speak to?
Can you talk about your process for finding folks to work with in Latvia?
Yeah, that also happened pretty organically. Luckily, I still have some friends and family that are connected to Latvia and live there. And I just, once I had an idea of what I wanted to research, I used the internet and some contacts that I had and just asked around, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Does anyone know anyone? And I think by Google search, I found a woman by the name of Eva Chevsko, who is she's got a PhD. I don't think she's in the university right now, but she had just written a book about Latvian healing traditions that was just like in full alignment with what I was researching. And I just took a chance. I reached out and took like a week or two, and she responded, and she was kind of like, I'm really sure like who you are, what's going on, but we kind of got over that pretty quickly. I told her what I was interested in, and she was super helpful. And then she also recommended somebody that had advised her through the process of writing her book. She ran the PhD department in anthropology at the University of Latvia, and this woman was like the person to have some sort of research connection with Latvia because she really knew everything from a folklore perspective. And she kind of understands that intersection between the folklore, song, and mythology. So it just sort of worked out, but it's really like pulling on those threads, like, and I would say that like first from the initial idea, like if there's something that like your heart is just pulled toward, like a country that you feel some sort of resonance with, or an idea that there's but even if you're not sure exactly what it is, just like start pulling out the closest thread and see what happens. But yeah, that all worked out for me.
That's great. Did Professor Herrenkohl have any like expertise in what you were studying there?
Not specifically, but he's really his expertise is trauma. And this is a culture that has had a lot of collective trauma over the generations. And somehow they've managed to stay resilient through that. And so even with my faculty advisor, though he wasn't like sort of the obvious choice, as far as, maybe you take someone who is more into like the arts or the indigenous sort of wisdom, which we also have advisors who really are experts in that. The trauma piece and just finding that interconnection, but he absolutely supported it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Sorry, I kind of just jumped in the middle of the session, but sounds like you had the perspective kind of an outsider, kind of an insider.
Yeah.
Which is a unique orientation.
Yeah.
I wonder if you'll talk more about that, and like for those of us who might be interested in working with communities with which we are an outsider, but have an adjacent, perspective, or kind of more in your case where we're more of an insider.
Yeah.
Just what that was like.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's interesting because you're a little bit in both worlds, right? Where you're like, okay, I have this outside perspective. I'm coming to America. Like we have a lot of connection and there's a lot of bond there, but also like I am a bit of an outsider. I have to be respectful of processes and traditions, but also sort of getting comfortable with my strengths in that. Like I can offer another perspective, and like, I'm just approaching humbly and with a learning mindset, curious, and sort of taking their lead of really leaning into my own strengths with some confidence. But yeah, just asking. People want to know, which is great. If there's an excitement and an interest, I think people will see that. Like, okay, like that's fine.
And just to follow up, I guess, were there linguistic barriers specifically for you?
Great question. So I've been told when I go to Latvia that I speak like a person from the country, like an old person.
Oh, wow.
Just because my grandparents came from the country, like 80 years ago. So I'm fluent, but it's like 8 years removed. So there were some barriers for sure. And I'm rusty. I don't speak Latin all the time, but it was also a great opportunity for me to do my life. So
They're great questions. Thank you.
This is just me being curious. How long did you go for?
I was there, I feel like longer than a lot of the other students that I was conversing with. I was there for 2 months.
Okay.
And the grant was hugely helpful. I mean, I couldn't have done it without the grant, honestly. And that covered my flights, which were expensive. I was lucky that I had family that I could stay with who happened to like be gone. Right? I had my own place. But I also like when I did stay in places, I really just doing like, the cheapest accommodations like but yeah.
Who, I guess, like helped you develop your curriculum life there? Was that very much you, or did you?
That is a great question. And it sort of evolved because the thing that I thought that I was going to research when I arrived, and that was some advice that I got from my advisor, was like, just sort of like let the research like pull you. And it really unfolded. I was just kind of listening, staying open, and yeah, sort of using my inner guide on that one. But kind of keeping in contact with my faculty advisor. I was like, here are the questions that I'm thinking about asking, and then he would give me some feedback because I was doing qualitative research. I was having interviews with people. And so, yeah, his guidance was really great for that.
And then, can I ask, sorry, did you then like have a product at the end that you like?
Yes, great question. It is not a requirement other than the poster, but I'm working on writing an article. Hopefully to publish in the near future.
I'm curious about the funding component. Apologies if you spoke about this earlier, but did the grant that you mentioned come from the School of Social Work, or was that external? And
that was the grant from the School of Social Work. I did also apply to 2 more grants that I didn't get. But the grants that like, for example, I applied to the grant through the Department of Eastern European Studies, just because there was alignment there and kind of finding other alignments in the grant.
And I'll talk a little bit more about some funding resources. There are some, so like regional grants, some other grants throughout U of M as a whole, those are a lot more competitive than the ones at the School of Social Work, just because there's more folks applying. But we have some resources for looking into some of those as well. Well, I want to move over. We actually have one of our online students, Victoria, who is here to share her experience as well. So Victoria, you can probably speak to some of the same questions that were asked, but I'm going to pull you up. Thank you all for my technology. Okay, I'm going to make this. Okay, Victoria, whenever you are ready, we are ready for you.
Sounds great. Well, hi everyone. I'm Victoria. I am a part-time online student doing the IP pathway. I'll be graduating this December. And I wanted to first kind of speak a little bit to how my project came about, my reason for pursuing a global independent study. So I do remember talking to Greta about this very early on. I personally had always wanted the opportunity to study abroad, and I didn't really get that chance during undergrad because I graduated during COVID and some other factors that played into that. So it was always important to me to get that opportunity to study abroad during my master's education. And that was actually one of the reasons that kind of drew me to pursuing my master's online with the University of Michigan. So I remember after speaking to Greta about it pretty early on, I just really appreciated the flexibility of the GIS program in the sense that even as an online student, I would get that opportunity to both choose where I wanted to study, choose a topic that was important to me, and that it would be available to me even being a part-time online student. So really having that flexibility. And then for my project, I had the idea in mind that I wanted to study or learn about a cross-cultural comparison of a mental health system in another country. I'd always been interested in just kind of comparing mental health systems and what that looks like. I was interested in the UK, I think partially because I don't speak any other languages, so I wanted that to not be a barrier as a part of my research. But I've also just really always been interested in the UK in general. So that was kind of my first choice in terms of what I was pursuing. And then it did work out for me that I was able to pursue my project in London. I worked with a community of practice in London, which started out as a research study identifying 7 core outcomes for survivors of human trafficking, and providing survivor care and improving well-being during their recovery process. The study has now, a few years later, turned into actually a case management model for survivors, ensuring their access to key resources and really being a resource for them during their recovery process. And those 7 core outcomes were secure and stable housing, safety from traffickers or abusers, long-term access to consistent support, compassionate and focus on trauma-informed care, finding purpose in life and reaching self-actualization, and then access to medical treatment and education. And so through this connection that I made with the name of the practice was Modern Slavery Core Outcome, I was able to conduct 10 qualitative interviews. 5 of those were with people who were in some form utilizing the model, whether they were part of the research team that created it or were providers that are actively utilizing the model. And then 5 that were familiar with it, but not currently utilizing the model. And so that's how I was able to conduct my project, learning more about those experiences, perspectives around supporting survivors, and then really asking questions about accessing the mental health system there in the UK for survivors specifically. So this project was really just a great way to learn about a new population. I have, for the past couple years, worked in human services around homeless services, but this was kind of a new opportunity to learn about a new population where there might be some crossover there. And then also just a new approach to supporting survivors and some of the strengths and weaknesses around the mental health system in the UK. So yeah, that was a little bit just about the research that I did specifically. And then I wanted to also share just a little bit about the process to getting there. So one of the first steps was finding a faculty member to support me in the project. So my process with that was actually I started just going on the School of Social Work website, going through the faculty directory, and then just reading through those like biographies of the tenure track faculty, just seeing what their experience was, maybe some research that they've done themselves that would kind of overlap or align with the research that I was interested in. And so after reading through those descriptions, I did narrow down to I think like 2 or 3 people that I thought would be a good match with my project. And then I just sent them an email, kind of reaching out and seeing if this was something that they would be interested in. I did receive pretty quick follow-up. I think maybe sent like 1 or 2 follow-up emails, and then did get a response back from Addie Weaver. She ended up being my faculty person supporting me in this project, and that really turned into a really good support for the specific research that I was aiming for. And that process kind of happened pretty quickly, just kind of turned into a couple of Zoom meetings talking about the project and next steps. Um, and then from there, the next big piece for me was really identifying an agency to work with. And so that part, because I didn't have any connections to the UK, I did not have anyone that I knew over there. So this was really going to be me throwing out cold calls, cold emails to people and seeing if anything happened. So I started out with just creating like a spreadsheet with researching agencies that aligned potentially with what I wanted to find out. So mental health agencies, nonprofits there, and just would mark if I received a response or if they said that was something that they couldn't support with. So I received a lot of no's and a lot of no responses, which definitely at times felt a little bit discouraging, but I just kept following up, started to ask around to within like my personal and professional networks if people knew of anyone or had connections. And that took a while, but I believe around February, I actually had a friend who was completing her MFT at another university, asked her field supervisor if she had any contacts, and she happened to have one contact in London working in the human trafficking space with an agency called Survivor Alliance, which was a part of this community of practice that I ended up getting connected to. So that kind of just worked out. I was able to, or she kind of assisted in facilitating an email to connect me to that person, which then connected me to someone else. Um, from there, it was just a little bit of like back and forth emailing. We ended up scheduling a Zoom kind of interview just to talk about the project. And then from there, it was, I believe, actually like almost right before I had to submit my grant application for this project that I was able to secure that. So definitely down to the wire there, but it ended up working out, and I ended up finding an agency that really was supportive of this project in the end. Um, so that was, I would say, definitely the most challenging aspect of kind of preparing for this project. But yeah, um, just wanted to end talking a little bit about what I learned from the experience. It really, I think, taught me just how to stay motivated. And if this is something that you really want to pursue, just keeping on track with that goal that you have, not giving up on it. It'll take a lot of patience at times, and just sticking with the goal that you have in mind. Um, I think it also helped me to learn about understanding the world from a global perspective and how every country has its own strengths and challenges. So being able to learn from that firsthand, I think will make you a better social worker and kind of really open up your eyes to thinking about the world from a broader perspective. Um, and yeah, I just strongly encourage anyone that has the opportunity to definitely do a global independent study if you can. Um, I think it won't always go as planned, but there's definitely some things that you'll learn along the way and connections that you'll get to make that I think um, are really important and definitely won't forget.
Thanks so much, Victoria.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for either of our student speakers? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, like kind of for both of you, but especially Victoria, since it's like you don't really know anyone out there. How did you guys navigate like that adjustment period of being in a new space and kind of like like creating community or just taking time maybe to do your research, but also embracing the environment for free? Go ahead, Victoria.
Victoria,
Do
could you hear the question okay?
do you mind repeating the question? It was just sounded very far away. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I know the room, the mics in this room are a little iffy. So the question was about just have since you didn't have any other connections while you were there, how did you go about sort of balancing the project part, doing your research while also getting connected, exploring the space, having life sort of things while you were there, and adjusting like the adjustment period. Did I capture that okay?
Yeah. So I would say, I think what helped me was starting the process of reaching out to people very early on. I think I started around like November or December. And so I think just starting that process early of like doing that research, identifying who you would want to reach out to, can help like ease some of that stress as it gets closer to like the deadline for submitting your grant application and things like that. And so definitely time management, of course. But I think just keeping in mind that like even if you are getting people who are not as interested in your project, that just gets you one step closer to finding the person that will. And so keeping that goal in mind. And I think also just like relying on Greta and the people in the Office of Global Studies as a resource. They were definitely encouraging me when I was feeling discouraged about it. And then as well as your faculty advisor kind of helping you problem solve that as it gets closer to and you're feeling like, okay, is this going to work out? It will, but just relying on resources as you can.
That and also I had the luxury of 2 months. So I really gave myself some time on the front to settle in, like probably a week where I really just focused on myself and like, getting over my jet lag. Right? But like just like easing into the environment, like offering me some grace with that, and just like, like I don't have to jump right into like, doing. I can ease in and sort of ready to emerge and really start engaging. Um, I would if you have the opportunity, give yourself even a couple extra days front and at the end. Remember that like have fun. It's supposed to be fun and it's a journey. And yeah, you don't have to like jump into like social worker. I'm gonna fix the world mode immediately. You come later.
I would say there's definitely considerations too for folks who really don't have a longer amount of time to travel. If you're enrolled in classes in the spring, summer and you really only have 2.5 or 3 weeks of considering that you don't have to do a 3 credit independent study, right? You can do something that's a little bit lighter work wise, project wise, and kind of spread out the academic and project work that you're doing. So you do have more time to devote to getting to know people, getting to know that community, especially if you're doing research where you're going to be doing interviews or interacting with folks where you want some time to get to know people, build some rapport, things like that. It's okay to think about how you might build that into your independent study as well, right? Like maybe part of your academic work that you plan with your faculty instructor is about doing some reflections on the process of building rapport with a client group when you get there. And so you can sort of make this adjustment period part of the project, if that makes sense. So I think you can really like, again, there's not a lot of structure to this. You can get really creative with how to build in best practices for social work as well as best practices for your own experience and caring for yourself while you're there, by thinking through what are the different aspects of this project that you want to have available to you, even if your time is limited. Other questions?
So were you guys like enrolled in other classes while you were abroad, and how was it?
That's a good question. I'll answer it because my situation was a little bit different. I was not enrolled in classes, but I was enrolled in the field. And I, again, was, super privileged to be blessed to this opportunity in my field practice. I do some homework and also working with my field supervisor. She let me, and the organization let me kind of front load with more hours than, take that time kind of at the end of the semester to do the study. My experience.
Victoria, can you talk about when you traveled and how that interacted or not with your coursework and your field work for that semester?
Yeah, so I actually went right in between the spring summer to fall semester. So I was only in London for, I think it was like exactly 2 weeks. So I finished up my spring summer semester, wrapped up field, then left that like weekend right after, and spent 2 weeks there. Then got back and started the next semester like a day or two later. So for me, it was like very quick turnover. But what I appreciated about it was that during those 2 weeks, I was completely off of field classes and I could really focus in on the research that I wanted to accomplish while I was there.
Thank you. Yeah, so you are actually, we cannot fund you because we're part of the School of Social Work. We cannot fund you to miss School of Social Work classes. So you cannot travel during scheduled classes, which is a tricky thing because a lot of our students are enrolled during that spring summer semester. So we'll talk about this. We'll kind of look at some calendar stuff together in a little bit. But most students who are enrolled in the spring summer are traveling either in the break between the winter and spring terms, which is that's usually like a just 2 weeks of break. So that is kind of like in Victoria's case, you're like leaving after class and getting back and walking into class. And then the other choice is to travel in the break between the summer and fall terms. In that case, you can request from your field instructor to front load your hours, but that is kind of a case by case. We cannot give you permission to do that or say that you have to do that. You cannot reduce your field hours in any way. You are responsible for all of your field hours for that term, but some field instructors will say, sure, you can take 2 weeks and we can fit those in earlier in the term, so that you can go for a little bit longer. Usually how the spring summer term looks is that classes end sometime in the beginning of August. A lot of times there's like a Monday class that ends like a week or two later, which is annoying, but there's kind of this extended amount of field education, which if your hours are complete, you're allowed to miss that time if your field instructor says it's okay. Any questions from folks online? You can chime in or put it in the chat. Okay. Well, why don't we give a hand to our presenters for today? Thank you both so much. And would you both be okay if folks have questions and they want to reach out to you, just as people who've done this before, if we share your contact information?
Please, please. And
Absolutely.
I would tell each and every one of you, just do it. Just do it, just do it, just do it. You'll figure out the rest.
Yeah,
Nice.
please.
Yeah.
How did y'all go about, right, like safety, or I don't know, insurance, or just like those logistical things?
Ooh.
I know 2 weeks maybe it might be a bit different, but I don't know, I guess especially 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So as far as like insurance and all of that, you actually do have to, it's a requirement that you purchase insurance through the University of Michigan. And then that covers you while you're traveling, which is great. And that just kind of gives you some peace of mind if something happens while you're there. I know Greta can speak to that. The pre-trip meeting that we did was really great because she really goes into like, how to protect yourself, how to have a game plan for things, like knowing where the local hospital is, like, making sure that you're using your common sense and making safe choices. So yeah, they support you with that. But
For the online folks, the question was about safety and insurance. So yeah, we do have like the insurance is required because anything that you're on U of M business, so like you're getting credit for this, you're required to have insurance to travel internationally. We do have a pre-departure orientation that's also required for all of our GIS grant recipients so that we make sure you have information about how to use that health insurance and travel insurance, as well as the safety protocols through U of M, the things that are set up here, and the things like the sort of networks we have set up internationally as well. Victoria, did you have any other comments on using insurance or safety or anything like that during your experience? I don't know if you had to tap into anything like that.
Yeah, no, I luckily didn't, but I think it was helpful just knowing that I had it in case anything were to happen, and just knowing how to access it. And then I think another thing in the pre-departure orientation was identifying like where the closest hospital will be to where you're staying. Those types of precautions I think are helpful in easing any anxiety in case anything were to happen.
Great. Yeah.
I have any questions for maybe more specifically for you, but I'm curious if we're interested in traveling to a developing country where there might be like safety concerns generally. Is the list of as there like a list of navigate artists about to travel to at a certain time or like are there there's things here?
Yes, that's a great question. And we actually have a lot of resources that I will go into. So we do not have, for the folks online, the question was about, is there a list of places you are not allowed to travel based on safety concerns? The University of Michigan keeps a list and keeps up based on current conditions of every place in the world of places that there are travel warnings or restrictions. So there's actually for graduate level students, there's nowhere that you are prevented from going. But if there is somewhere that has a restriction, you would have to make like a safety plan that gets approved by the safety team. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, well, I know that Victoria, you have to jump off here in a minute, so I'm going to let you all go. We'll give out your contact information if students have more questions, and I'm about to get into a lot more like really detailed information so that y'all have already heard. So thank you so much to both of you for being here and taking the time today. We have other, just for the folks in the room, we have posters of other folks who did GIS stuff today, like so we have those and they're also online that you'll be able to explore later, and I'll give you the link for that. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Victoria, for taking the time.
And the posters were actually a really good opportunity to reflect and think through what the experience was for you. I mean, I felt like when you get home, you're thrown back into life. Doesn't suddenly back in, but just having a moment to gather. Good part.
Thanks so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you all. I'll do it. And feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, or it can just be like,
Enjoy the rest of your semester. All right. Whew. Y'all feel free to like get up and stretch if you need to. This is like gets into a lot of text on slides, largely so that you can have them as a resource for later. Feel free to interrupt me with questions. Feel free to take care of yourselves while we're going through this. But really the rest we're going to go through just sort of like eligibility and how do I get started? And okay, now I've gotten some examples, but like making sure that everyone understands what is this. And then we'll go through some safety sort of considerations and things like that, and then talk about what the application looks like. So some of this, we like to have students speak first because I feel like you have a little bit of context for what we're talking about, like what it might look like now. So a question a lot of folks have is like, how do I get started with this? And I like to kind of break it into two things, right? There's a where, like where do I want to go and what do I want to do? And I had conversations with both Lila and Victoria about this while they were planning theirs. Lila really knew she wanted to go to Latvia, but she was like, what do I want to do there? And that was like where she spent a lot of her time thinking about the what, because she knew the where. Similarly, Victoria was like, I want to go somewhere where I can speak English. So she had sort of a region that she was looking at that would be easier. And she was also spending a lot of time thinking about the what. But some folks come and they say, I really want to look at disability justice and I could go anywhere. Like where should I go? And so some of that is thinking about who you can connect to, where like what are going to be barriers based on different areas, what are safety concerns, who's a faculty instructor who maybe has some expertise in a region of the world that you could tap into, things like that. So again, there's just kind of a lot of brainstorming that happens. If you don't already come in knowing both the where and the what, that's okay. And I think the flexibility of this can take you down some roads you might not expect. So again, there's a lot of opportunity there. The purpose of your travel. So like what a project can be, it involves, like there is a project of some sort, right? You are either doing volunteering or some sort of service learning, you're doing some research, you're doing some sort of comparative study, other things that you can come up with that are convincing, but I would say those are the most common. Both Lila and Victoria, you heard them talk about they were doing some research, but that's not required. You don't have to do research. You can be connecting with an organization where you are going to be doing some volunteering and maybe some informational interviews, or where you're going to be interviewing staff and some clients and comparing a system in this international location with what that looks like here. Some other examples, we had a couple years ago a student who went to Japan and was looking at community-based group services for oncology patients and participated in those, right? Was a volunteer, sat in on some group sort of art therapy sessions, and just kind of helped out with what they needed there. We had a student who was really interested in comparing psychiatric systems in Ghana versus the US. She was in a psychiatric field placement here, and so went and toured psychiatric hospitals in Ghana for her global independence study. So those sort of like comparison things like that are pretty common. But again, your sort of what you're doing on the ground is again pretty open, but those are the most common things. As you heard, you do have to have a faculty instructor. It does not have to be, like Lila said, it doesn't have to be someone who has expertise in either the region or the topic that you have. It could be someone that you're just connected to, or Victoria went and looked through, okay, who has expertise in what I'm looking for? I think especially for our online students, you might feel less connected or like to just have less casual contact with other faculty other than who you're in class with. So there's no right or wrong. It can be your academic advisor. It can be someone you've already gotten to know, or you can really look for that person who's going to be able to give you a lot of guidance in your project. And then the other thing that they both talked about finding, right, is some sort of agency, organization, institution, professional, someone who's going to work with you while you're there. So that is a requirement of the grant application, is that you have to show proof that you've been in touch with someone who says, yes, I know this person is coming. Yes, I agree to help them do interviews with my staff or volunteer at my program or do a month-long internship or something, right? We just have to know that someone's on the other side that's going to help you complete your project. And then there also have to be some academic outcomes and assignments. So you don't just get credit for traveling. There has to be something at the end of it, right, that your instructor can grade. That can be, there can be some pre-work for that in the semester. Some people submit a literature review before they even travel. Some people don't. Sometimes people put together, like I said, reflections. They do a journal article or some sort of, more academic article while they're there. We've had people do documentaries, photo voice assignments. Again, it can be more creative assignments. It doesn't have to be any one thing, but there has to be something gradable that your faculty instructor agrees to that also matches the number of credits that your independent study is worth. So the number of credits is not connected to the length of time you travel. It's connected to how much academic work you are outputting from that. And that's up to your faculty instructor to decide. And then, like I mentioned, we have students, there is a requirement of the grant is that you make a poster at the end of it, and we do keep an archive. So there's a link there in the slides, which I'll send out. If you want to take a look at other projects that students have done recently, you're more than welcome to. That's an example of poster, but we have some in the room as well. Okay, so a little bit more about eligibility. We talked about this a bit already. So I won't go back through it. If you don't have international travel experience, you can definitely apply. And with that, so Victoria actually didn't have a passport. This was her first international experience. And we have a passport grant here as well that's like part of the application. So if you mark that you don't have a US passport and you never had, we'll actually pay for you to get it. So we really love to see first-time travelers get an experience through this program. Okay, so we talked about this. This is just a little more about the breakdown. So your faculty instructor, once you have them confirmed, they're really responsible for all of the course related things about this experience, right? So they decide the number of credits you can have. They decide the grading, if it's going to be pass fail or if it's going to be a letter grade and what your grade is, all of that, and sort of like anything about if you're doing research, like they would be the people who you could lean on for developing research questions or things like that, for IRB support if that's something you need. Leo lecturers and field faculty unfortunately cannot serve as instructors for GIS just because it's a contract issue. So it has to be either the clinical research or the tenure track faculty members. And we have a faculty directory on the School of Social Work website where you can filter by those different tracks so you make sure you understand who's who. The obstacle activities, so my role and my colleagues' role in this is managing the grant application, supporting you and figuring out sort of like what you're putting together for your project in terms of applying for the grant. We manage all the sort of health, safety, and other logistic questions that you might have. That's more of our role. So Office of Global Activities is more logistic grant funding and sort of project getting started, and your instructor is going to be sort of everything having to do with the course. So that's kind of the differentiation between the two. Okay, and we talked about this as well. So travel has to happen during the spring, summer term or in those breaks right around it. There is a requirement for the grant that you're traveling for at least 2 weeks, not including travel time. If you have an extenuating circumstance, please reach out and ask instead of saying, oh, I can't do it because there's only an exactly 14-day break in between the spring and summer or the winter and spring semesters. If it's something like that, that it's just how our academic calendar works out, we're willing to work with you. But generally, we want to see you on the ground in an international location for at least 2 weeks, just because of that is sort of the wishes of the funders for this opportunity. That's a significant amount of travel time. If you are thinking of traveling in August, just of note that your travel has to take place before the grading deadline, which is what is like the official end of the semester. So each semester there's like an end of classes date, there's an end of field date, and then there's what's called the grading deadline, which is when all your grades have to be in. And so you need to have the majority of your travel done by that end of the grading deadline, which is usually like late August 25th ish. Again, because this is a graded course, so your grades have to be in, especially if you're graduating that semester, so it doesn't delay the conferment of your degree. Of note with that, graduation this year for 2026 is going to be August 22nd. So that's a consideration if you are an August graduate. If you want to travel in August, you might be traveling over graduation. And that's something some folks are fine with, and something some folks are like, no way, that's non-negotiable. So again, it kind of depends on how your field and classwork schedule shakes out. But some folks do choose to travel over graduation, and some folks choose to travel a different time so that they can attend graduation. Yes.
Do you know the class end date for August?
It has not been posted yet, unfortunately. A lot of times, so I believe the winter term dates are up, but spring summer dates are not up yet. They should be posted in the next month or two, hopefully. They will definitely be posted by the time you're submitting your application. But yes, that's always we're always on top of the registrar's office to get us those dates. So it just they go through a whole approval process. But the academic calendar is linked in there, and they'll be up as soon as they are released.
And calendar is like during the school year, or we have our own? I know that happened this year.
Yes, U of M has, well, the school social work has a slightly different calendar than U of M. So there are some rules that, I never remember exactly what they are. There's like some parameters based on the U of M calendar that our school has to fall between. But yes, we are offset from most of the rest of the university for our start date, right, by a week of at the beginning of the fall semester, and that remains true. So it's always, that is actually a consideration if you, I don't have it on here, if you're a dual degree student, or if you're taking classes in other units in other schools, that's just like a consideration, is sometimes those units might start before or after our classes start, so it gets a little hairy. So that just takes some planning ahead, right? And again, hopefully our academic calendar will be posted within the next month or two, so you'll be able to kind of put those extra puzzle pieces together, but that is something to be aware of. Yep. And so how long it can be, you can't miss any class sessions. That is like a hard and fast rule. So if you're enrolled in spring summer, then you'll be traveling during term breaks or when you're not in classes. If you're not enrolled in spring summer, so if you're a 20-month student or otherwise not going to be enrolled in any credits during the spring summer, you can travel anytime between the end of the winter term and the beginning of the fall term. So we've had 2 years ago, we had a student go for a little more than 3 months. She was in Australia doing research. So you can do a really substantial project if you have the funding and desire to put something like that together. But 2 weeks is the minimum. So it can be, we've had students go all in between those kind of time frames. I do have the academic calendar linked here. This is where I had, if you have dual degree or classes outside of school social work, just to be really mindful that our calendar is a little different. And again, the permission for front loading your field hours or missing weeks of field education, which does not mean missing hours, but missing weeks of field education, is up to your faculty instructor. And I strongly recommend that you talk to your field faculty about that as well, just so everything's above board. The off-school activities cannot give you permission to do that, but in general, that's worked out just fine for students traveling in the end of August.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but like what scenario would it be where you have to front load your field hours, but you don't have class?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of times, except for Monday classes, which always get bumped late because of holidays in the spring, summer, a lot of times Tuesday classes end like the end of July or the first week in August. Yes, it's very odd, just like how the schedule, and that's not always true, but depending on what day your class is on, you might be done with classwork. And also, you know, there's part-time students, things like that. Like there's a lot of different scenarios. So sometimes folks are done the very beginning of August with classes, but they are scheduled to be in field for 2.5 more weeks. So that's sort of like the field time in August. And that's not true for everyone. Some folks will be in classes through the middle of August. Again, just depending on the schedule and the holiday schedule, how classes get bumped for the year. That makes sense? Okay, logistics to consider. So there's a lot to put together. Again, this is student initiated. So there's so many things to think about. Yay! Airfare, room and board, visa and applications, transportation in another country, travel health insurance, vaccinations, health and safety. There's a lot to put together. So this is all stuff that I talk a lot about and I can help with from our office. We cannot do things like find room and board for you in another country, but I can tell you what students have done in the past, what some options are, where some places you might get started to look. Some of the health and safety stuff. So we, again, will have a required pre-departure orientation. We have resources for thinking about safety levels in different countries and things like that. So there's a lot of things for y'all to think about, but then we're also here to help support you in thinking through them as you're developing your ideas for your project and for your travel. If all of that sounds really overwhelming and you're like, whoa, I don't want to think about how I'm going to do transportation in another country, I encourage you to think about using a program provider. I have a list linked here of different program providers, but these are basically like study abroad agencies, sort of things. Like you can go through these program providers who have either contracts or set up are sort of like a liaison to connect students to experiences in other countries, right? So those are most often internships, like short-term internships or volunteer programs. You can work with a program provider to get connected to an experience in another country, and you have the option with many of them that they will also arrange your room and board or arrange transportation, right? There's kind of different levels of support that they'll provide if you decide to use those services. They do cost money, but for some folks that feels worth it to not have to figure out all the logistics themselves. We don't keep a list of program providers here. I can, if you're interested in going down that route, tell you ones that students have used in the past, but there's no one, we don't like vet opportunities for that. So we encourage you to do your own vetting process, but it can sort of simplify things if that's something you're interested in, just an option to think about. And then I know there's a question about additional funding. So we do keep a funding page on the Obstacle of Activities website. So we have them by month deadline. And they happen throughout the year. For spring summer travel, most funding opportunities will open up in January or February. So we will send out in our newsletter as big ones start opening up. Different opportunities that are open. But the big ones are, besides our obstacle activities, this grant, the $3,000 from this grant, our alumni board at the School of Social Work also funds international travel, and that's a scholarship that comes out in usually February or March each spring. That's a really good one because it's contained to the School of Social Work. So again, it's less competitive than those big U of M ones. But like I talked about earlier, there are regional and sort of like identity-based, heritage-based, different scholarship opportunities across the university that you're welcome to apply for as well. Self-funding is also an option, and we do have a page about that. That's like setting up a GoFundMe to have other, have personal ways of raising funds. If you are planning to go to Australia for 3 months and it costs a lot more than $3,000 and you're trying to figure out ways to make that work. So there's advice for that on that link too. Just a moment to talk about research. So if you are doing research as part of your independent study project, please talk with your faculty instructor about whether or not you need IRB approval to be able to do that. Sometimes I have students come talk to me and say, well, I'm going to research what school social work looks like in Norway. But if in that kind of research, you mean more like I'm going to do some informational interviews or I'm going to make some observations, but you're not doing qualitative or quantitative research, you don't need IRB approval for that, right? So if you're doing more sort of investigation, or if you're doing, like I said, observation, if you're doing interviews, you likely don't need to be, but it's good to check. Your faculty instructor will be the best person to advise you on that. If you are considering doing a PhD program, or you would like to be published and you think that your GIS work might be part of that, is very important to get approved for IRB now, because that cannot be retroactive. So I actually have had a student who was, considering maybe doing a PhD and was kind of using her GIS project to be like, okay, I think like maybe this is the road I want to go down. And it ended up being really a good experience, but she didn't get IRB approval, so she couldn't use, right, that data that she had already collected. for her future work. So if you're thinking about it, it's better to at least, we have a lot of resources for that on campus, folks who can talk it through with you. So you can at least get some information before you go and get a clear sense of whether or not that's something you need. Okay, here's to your health and safety questions. So yeah, where can you go is basically anywhere, almost. We are going to talk about these things. So, oh boy, yeah. So some just considerations for travel, right? If between the what and the where, your where is like wide open, there's a lot of considerations, right? And we write them out here, but thinking about where you're going to be comfortable, where are you going to be able to communicate to a degree that you feel good about for the type of project you have. Do you have any considerations with your own citizenship status and how that interacts with any international location? How much does it cost to go to different places? What is the climate there during our spring, summer, right? Lots of considerations for you to think through if you're feeling pretty open about where you go. But this is what I was talking about, that U of M keeps a travel risk rating system. They update it monthly. They are very in the know about everything happening everywhere, which is incredible to me. So they have two categories. One is travel health, and then one is travel safety. So health ratings can be low, medium, or high, and then travel is just, there's a designation with a warning, which is a lower level, or a restriction is a higher level. For any of these, grad students can travel if they have an approved health or safety plan. When we have a specific committee at U of M, it's outside of the School of Social Work, but they manage all of the health and safety plan approvals. They are quite detailed, but they just want to make sure that you have the resources and the information you need to stay safe in other countries that do have some sort of heightened risk. So the risk that they look at includes, political risk, it includes sort of like natural disasters or things currently happening or happening in the recent past. Includes like any sort of virus outbreaks or things like that for health. If there are, we've had students travel to like not active conflict zones, but sometimes there's like a regional restriction, but you can still travel to the country, even if there's active conflict happening. But again, they're really looking to make sure that you understand the risk and that you have resources to manage them. Here we go. So there's a risk rating website, so you can enter any country that you might. I traveled to Guatemala, and so you can see in Guatemala they have a travel warning right now for the whole country, and they have a travel restriction in some parts of the country. So if I were traveling to Guatemala, I would need to fill out a safety plan because there is a warning where I would talk about what resources I have to keep myself safe. So that's what is there. These are Department of State also keeps a country by country risk sort of list. Ours is a little bit different than that. It's just based on U of M standards, but we have a really good group of people who work on this and are happy to talk through that process with you or help you assess your level of risk as well. These are just some other resources. Like I said, there's other country by country information pages out there for both health and safety. And then this is just a resource that the OGA put together years ago about identities abroad. So thinking about how your social identities here in the US do not map exactly the same into a different, especially international context, right? And so we have this resources just thinking about different identities that you might hold and some reflection questions or things to research to get an understanding of what your identities might be, how they might be perceived similarly or differently in different countries. And also, like for example, for disability, there's suggestions of resources and thinking about how to navigate disability abroad where there aren't things like the ADA or accommodations, protections, and what that looks like, and how to kind of think through planning and navigating your trip planning with that in mind. So just a resource for you there. Okay. I'm going to pause. That's all my sort of like eligibility. What is it? How do you do it? Information. The next part of this is just a little bit about the application and what that looks like. So are there any questions that feel like you want to ask now about this kind of like first chunk of what a GIS is? Also just talked for a long time.
I don't know if this quite relates to what you were just talking about.
Totally fine.
But like, about how many students do these every summer?
That's a great question. So
I'm sure it varies.
it does vary, although it hasn't varied very much in the last couple of years. Before COVID, we had like 35 students going abroad doing this. Since COVID, we've had between 4 and 7 each year. So it's been a really small group. Yeah. We have been able to fund all of our competitive applications, like our complete competitive applications. We've been able to fund all of them in the last couple of years, which is awesome. But I will say this group is twice as big as last year's info session, and so I don't know. I've had more interest this year, but I've said that every year. And we've continued to have between like 5 and 7 students travel. This summer we had 6. And we had more applications than that, but again, like complete applications, we've been able to fund if they were complete and reasonable. So yeah, it's a small group, small and mighty.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
Is how many, like, what percentage of students get funding
Mhm.
from you all? But
Yeah. And we do, I think there's the students that we have not been able to fund were really like something major was missing. Like they didn't have an agency to work with abroad, right? Like there's a pretty significant piece of their application missing, or their project was just not put together. And I'll talk about that in the less, or, is just not really clear or compelling, or, there is a review committee for this that I'm on. And one of the discussions each year is like, it sounds like this person is asking us to fund a vacation. And that is something that has been very, very unlikely to be funded. So yes, they're really looking for actual project happening in the application. Good question. The application, fingers crossed, is opening today. I'm waiting for one of my colleagues to update a page that I don't have access to, but I'm hoping it will be open today. If not, I will confirm that it's open and send the portal information when I send out the recording and the slides for this session so that you all know. So we have a portal that's used by all of U of M to apply for study abroad programs. It's called Encompass, and it sort of hosts our Global Dependent Study grant application. The application deadline is not until March 1st, so y'all have a long time to work on this, largely because, as you heard Victoria, I think especially mentioned, like she was sending out cold emails to an agency to work with, and it took some time. And I met with her many times and was like, it's been a month and I followed up twice and I haven't heard from anyone. And like sometimes that happens. And yet she still went. And every year, students who have no connections in the country that they're going to, like, get a response and find a way to go. But it can take months. So it's just we give sort of like a long lead time for folks to put this together and really be able to submit a complete application by March. Yeah, so this is just a little bit about what's contained in the application since I couldn't pull up the portal today. But there's just kind of general questions about who you are and what program you're in here. Like I said, we do ask about whether or not you have a US passport because we are happy for you to get one if you have never had one. We'll ask questions about your plan for GIS, right? And so this is something, again, you don't necessarily need to know, you aren't going to have bought your plane tickets by the time you submit this, but we want to know within a couple of days, like what's your departure and your return dates, so we get a sense of when you're going, where you're going, who you're working with, all of that. And then we have 5 essays that you have to submit. They're not super long. Bless you. So the first one is really just about describing your project, right? What are you going to do? What are your day-to-day tasks like? Who are you working with? What are your goals? How are you going to carry out those goals? Very like, this is the part where you're showing us that you're not just going on vacation. Like you have thought this through and you have a project to do and you have specific tasks on the ground. We want to hear about your motivation. This is like projects that like we get excited about in our office are projects that fit into your educational or your professional goals or are something that you've always wanted to explore, right? Like a little bit of like motivation behind why you're doing this is always really exciting for us to hear and exciting for us to fund. Because this is a credit bearing course, you have to relate it to the CSWE social work competencies. So that's this question number 3, naming specific competencies and how they relate to your project. You don't have to go through all 9 competencies, but we do have a link to the competencies in there, so you can talk about a couple of them. Again, because we have to make sure that this is worthy of credits. Those are the competencies, but they'll be linked in the application. There's a question about how your GIS project addresses social justice or well-being of individuals or communities. I encourage you to maybe consider using the PODS framework to answer this question. Again, we're connecting this. This is coursework, so we're connecting to sort of things that are required of our other courses at the School of Social Work. And then, like I spoke about earlier, there are academic assignments or some sort of academic product that has to come out of these. And so giving at least an outline of what those are that you talked about with your field instructors, or your faculty instructors so far. Okay, these are just a couple other things that are required. You have to submit a form that your faculty instructor signs saying, yes, I'm willing to be the faculty instructor. A travel cost sheet is like a budget sheet where you make an approximate budget of how much it will cost for you to complete this global independent study project. I often get the question of like, should I like lowball on this budget sheet? Like, will you be more likely to fund me if I say it'll only be $2,000? I always say, please don't do that, because if you submit a $2,000 budget, we'll give you $2,000, right? We're not going to give you $3,000 if you submit a $2,000 budget. If you submit a $6,000 budget, that's okay. We're still only going to give you $3,000, right? So $3,000 is our max. We cannot fund you for more than you say your budget is. We encourage you to be honest about your budget, but there's no reason to like try to make it seem like it is less than it is. We have a budget for our office set for this opportunity, and we fund as many students as we have set aside in the budget for. So yeah, just an honest budget sheet is just fine. You have to show proof that an organization or agency, institution, person abroad is expecting you to come. Oh, and then I also wanted to just mention, this is a to-do list, kind of a checklist for global independent study, where I break down all of these things, all the sort of like what you have to do to put this together, and sort of a month by month. So this isn't hard and fast, but gives you sort of a sense of like, what should I do first? When should I start contacting agencies? When should I contact faculty instructors? Things like that. So that's on our website and will be in the slides too. If that is a way your brain is structured, it's all on like a 2-page handout. Following the directions is really helpful. It always breaks my heart when we have to like reject an application or return an application because it's just missing something. So if anything's confusing, there's a lot of parts to this. You are always welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to do clarifications. I cannot review applications before you submit them just because I am on the review committee to make decisions, but I'm always happy to advise, support, clarify. So please reach out. This is my my calendar for advising appointments. So the link is there. Again, you're also always welcome to just email our office and we can set you up that way. But I have weekly office hours, and if none of them work for you, you can just let me know your availability, and I'm happy to set things up that way as well. Okay, and then this is just, we're at the very end. We are hosting a trans non-binary passport info session and clinic. This is an annual event, although this year we are adding an info session into it. So we're gonna have a legal expert come and talk about if you, for like considerations for getting a passport, choosing a gender marker on your passport, and for travel if you are trans or non-binary. Some of those policies have changed in the last 6 months, and there's ongoing lawsuits. So we're going to have a legal expert just kind of talk about considerations. And then we are going to have folks from the county clerk's office come and be able to submit your applications on site. We'll also have passport pictures that you can get taken for free. So it's kind of a little one-stop shop. So if you don't have a passport yet and you are looking to do that in a place where you can ask questions, especially around gender or name changes, that will be at the end of November, and it'll be here in the School of Social Work. And if you listen to this whole hour and a half and you're like, I don't think this is for me, this is way too much, I just would like to put a plug in your ear that we do have other international opportunities available to MSW students. We have a faculty-led course each August that, again, students, online students, residential students, students from all curriculum tracks and pathways are welcome to apply for. We have not yet announced where the August 2026 course will take place, but this past year, 2025, students went to Ghana and another group went to India. And students went to India the year before as well. So we're really excited to be able to offer this again. This opportunity is a lot more structured, right? So faculty leads it, plans out the course, you travel as a group, your accommodations are already set. So it really takes some of the logistics and planning out of it, but still a really, really valuable experience for credit based around a social work related issue. So our information session for that will be later this fall after we get all the details finalized for location and instructor. That's all I have for you all. Was there more questions that came up at any point of what we've been talking about this afternoon?
I just have a clarifying question. So like the only application that we have to fill out is that grant application.
Yes, the grant application is the same as the Global Independent Study application. If for some reason you were not to be selected as a grant recipient, you can still do a Global Independent Study. We actually have students most years do this who for one reason or another, you know, couldn't get all the pieces together for the application and so weren't funded, but still decided to do it. So they either got a different scholarship, different funding, self-funded, anything like that. So we can still support you to do a global independent study. But yes, the opportunity and the grant are all one together.
Oh,
Great.
So will you like email us or like will we get an email whenever that's open?
Definitely. So I will definitely email everyone who registered for this today, specifically to let you know when it is open. I'll send the slides and the recording from today as well. But then it will also be with the OGA sends out the obstacle activities, sends out a newsletter every Monday. It'll be in there. It'll be up on our website. But yes, I will definitely let you all know when it's open. Other question?
Is there a benefit to submitting the application earlier rather than later? Like, is it a rolling application?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not. I mean, you can submit it whenever you are ready, but our review team won't look at it until March. So there's no reason to hurry. Good question.
For budgets, I'm sure it like really varies, but is there like something common to consider?
Oh, well, so I will say, do I have on here? There is I'll just pull this up what it looks like. So we actually have like all your anticipated expenses on there. Yeah. And there's like lines for other. So I will say some people have done like thought of good things for other, like if you are bringing materials with you that you had to buy, or I don't know, if there's something like that, you can, Visa is on here. I think most of the costs are on here. Feel free to use the other line if you need to. But yeah, it's all kind of set up for you to think it through. Yeah. If more questions come up, I'm around. Thank you all so much for being here today. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from many of you.